Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and this is my review for Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, where I will be covering the entire Season 2 of Strange New Worlds. I have already done weekly reviews for each individual episode, so you should check that out on my channel if you have not already. This is kind of my overview of the entire season, and I've got three objectives here. The first one is to just kind of give some of my thoughts of the season as a whole, maybe talk a little bit about how it compares to season one, and just kind of spitballing, just kind of give my thoughts. And then I'm going to go through each of the 10 episodes quickly. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on each of them since I have done full-length reviews for each of them already, but I'm going to give some quick thoughts and then give my updated rating out of 10. When I say updated, some of them have changed, some of them haven't, from when I did my original reviews on these episodes. So I'll let you know if they've changed or not as I go through them. And in some cases, I have rewatched the episodes recently, not all of them, but some of them. And so maybe I'll have additional thoughts to throw in there. But I don't want to spend a ton of time on each of the episodes since I've already done reviews on them. But I'm going to do that, go through my new ratings or updated ratings for all of them, and some of them are the same. And then at the end of this video, I will give my rating out of 10 for the season as a whole. So that is my objectives here, or are my objectives if I'm going to use proper grammar. So let us go ahead and start with objective number one. Not to be confused with Una Chin Riley, number one. All right, bad joke. Okay, let's forget that. Let's get into it. So, season 2 was supposed to be the season of big swings. We heard Anson Mount constantly talking about that in the build-up for the season, that they take a lot of big swings in season 2, a lot of risks, a lot of chances. They really go for it. It'll do a lot of different things. And honestly, for a while, I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. But I think at the end of episode 9, and I look back in retrospect, I can kind of see it. I think you can really see it in episodes 7 through 9. I think even putting those three episodes together was in and of itself a big swing. So episode 7 is the Lower Decks crossover episode. You're doing a crossover with an animated show, and it's a very lighthearted comedy type episode, also a very heartfelt episode. A lot of really heartfelt moments, a lot of teary-eyed moments in that episode, as well as laughter. And then the very next episode, which was only a few days later because they put episode 7 in the middle of the week the way that they did, the very next episode, this is the darkest episode in Strange New Worlds, probably in all of modern Trek. They're really trying to emulate that Deep Space Nine dark feeling. I've heard people compare it to the Siege of AR-15, not AR-15, AR-47, whatever that episode was called, the one with Nog getting, his leg amputated in that battle and all that stuff. I personally compare it more to Duet from Deep Space Nine. But the Deep Space Nine kind of feel very dark, so drastically different than the episode that was streaming just a few days earlier. Then 1 week later, episode 9 comes along, and it's just this ridiculous, silly, over-the-top musical, and everybody's busting out in a song, and it's like, there couldn't be a batch of 3 episodes that were more different from each other. And then when I go back and kind of, after seeing episode 9, go back and look at the season as a whole, I'm like, okay, I can see what he's talking about, because each episode is really a drastically different genre. I think that episode 7 through 9 is where it is most apparent. But if you look at it as a season as a whole, they do that every week. And they also did do that in season 1. And that's one of the things I liked about season 1, is that everything they did, I thought they did well, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. But I thought they were doing different things every week then. But I think in season 2, it's even a little more drastic. They took it to a little bit more of an extreme. doing the different genres. But both seasons do that. And I think both seasons are similar in a lot of ways. I was trying to wrap my head around how I compare it to season one and whether I like it better or worse or they're about the same. It's hard because of all the episodes being so drastically different from one another in season two, and the ones in season two being so drastically different from the ones in season one. So it's very difficult. And I will use my ratings to kind of guide me in this. But it isn't totally helpful because, as you see when I give my updated ratings, that I will end up giving more 9s and 10s than I gave in season one. And yet I'm also giving more 6s and 5s than I gave season one. I only gave one episode a 6 in season one. That was what was it called? Love Lift Us Up to Where We Belong. That's what I always call Love Lift Us Up to something lifting us up, something with the kid. In Pike having the bad romance and all that stuff. I gave that one a 6 last season. That's the only one I gave a rating that low. Everything else was a 7 or higher. Whereas this season, I gave 1 6 and 1 5. So I gave a little bit lower ratings than I gave, but also I gave higher ratings. So that's really hard. It doesn't really help me to decide which is better. It's very hard to compare. But I think where I come out, and by the way, I will do the comparison at the end of this video when I give my rating out of 10, and I'll compare it to the rating out of 10 that I gave to last season. But where I really, I think, ultimately land on this season is this was a very strong season. I really very, very much enjoyed it. I think there were hits and misses. And I think your mileage is going to vary on what was a hit and what was a miss. I remember when I did my episode 5 review, which I declared to be my least favorite of the season at that point, and remains my least favorite of the season, that everyone seemed to have their own least favorite of the season at that point. I remember my brother's was episode 3 at that point. Sean Ferrick and Shrek Culture was episode 4, which I still don't understand. I think that's a perfectly fine episode. I don't know what crawled up his butt when he watched that episode. But everybody had their different least favorite episode. And I think the only one that ultimately really unites the fandom, where I think is pretty much universally loved, unless you're like my mom and don't like Lower Decks, but for the most part, I think the fandom was pretty united in their love of episode 7. I think everybody was gushing about it, including myself. So I think that's the only one where everyone seemed to really come together. And then the most divisive episode was episode 9, where it was very much you either love it or hate it episode, unless you're me and you're in the middle. I was not in the hate it or love it camp. I'm kind of in the middle of that one. I'm very rare, though. For most other people, it's either like one of the best things ever or one of the worst things ever. So, point is, depending on where you come down on each of these individual episodes, you're probably going to have a different opinion on the season as a whole. If you think that there were more bad episodes than season 1, then you're probably going to come down lower on it than season 1. With me, it's tough because there's more good episodes, but also more episodes I didn't like as much than season 1. But again, I'll get to that at the end. I'll give you my rating out of 10 for this season, and I'll tell you what last season's was, and compare and contrast. And we'll conclude with my season 1, season 2 comparison. But before we get into that, let me go ahead and get into my quick episode reviews for each of the 10 episodes and my updated rating. Again, reviews, but quickly, because I've already done full reviews of each of these episodes. And in the cases of episodes that I've rewatched, I might throw in a couple extra thoughts. But very quickly give my updated rating out of 10 for each, and then I will come back here at the end and give you my overall rating for the season. So let's go ahead and dive into the episodes. Okay, let's start with Season 2, Episode 1, The Broken Circle. This is actually one that a lot of people have named as their least favorite episode, or at least they had about halfway through the season. A lot of people were dumping on this episode, and I really can't understand why. I thought it was a really strong season premiere. I kind of like that we get to focus on Spock and M'Benga and Nurse Chapel a little bit more, and Pike is not in the limelight. He got that big season 1 finale, so I quite enjoyed this episode. I thought it was not the greatest, but very solid, and my rating out of 10 has not changed. I had given it an 8 out of 10, and it is still a solid 8 out of 10 for me. Moving on to Season 2, Episode 2, Ad Astra per Aspera. So hard to say that title. It took me like 10 takes of this recording to get that right. Anyways, so this is an episode that initially I really didn't love quite as much as other people. I thought it was a pretty strong episode, but other people were hailing it as one of the best trial episodes of all time, and one of the best episodes of Modern Trek, or maybe even one of the best episodes in all of Star Trek. Let's pump the brakes on that. Not quite that good. I did have some minor issues with it, like the over-the-top evil Vulcan Admiral was very cartoonish to me, and I thought it was contrived writing that the judges allowed him to get away with pulling Pike into it. When the lawyer objected that Pike is not on trial here, the judges didn't actually say anything to that, and it's absolutely true. Pike is not on trial here, and he shouldn't have been allowed to do that, and I thought that was contrived writing to raise the stakes a little bit, and I didn't think the stakes needed to be raised. I had other little minor issues with this episode, but there were some great moments. I mean, it's hard not to be uplifted by Una's speech about Ad Astra Pereira. I can't believe I have to say that again. To the stars with hardship, and her whole story. And it is hard for me as a trans woman to not relate to the very clear parallels drawn between what the Illyrians are going through and what oppressed groups like trans people, gay people, people of color are going through today. So it is hard for me not to connect with that. So of course I do like this episode. I just didn't think it was this incredible, amazing, one of the best things ever that other people did. Now with that all said, I had originally given this an 8. I went back and rewatched it. I wanted to give it a 9. I wanted to raise it up to 9. I decided I'm going to raise it up to an 8.5, so maybe slightly more than I had originally given it. That is my official rating for this episode now. There's a lot to love. There's a lot to love. I just still had some issues with it, but 8.5, that's a pretty strong rating, and it has gone up half a point. Okay, moving on to Season 2, Episode 3, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Another Shakespeare quote episode title, and another time travel episode that has the word tomorrow or yesterday or past or present or future in the title. So it works for both things. So I absolutely loved this episode when I first saw it, and I decided to watch it again to see if I would change my rating on it. And I did, and I'll get into that. But just first, why I love this episode. I think the chemistry between Christina Chong and Paul Wesley is palpable. It's just really good. I found it interesting to see yet another alternate version of Kirk. Not that we haven't seen enough of those, but I found the concept of this Federation-less future where Earth is kind of on its own to be very interesting, and I absolutely love the twist in the end that is because Khan was killed that the Federation didn't exist. I said in my original review that it's kind of on a more universal scale, the same concept as the Next Generation episode Tapestry, where that was more of a personal level for Picard, where something awful needed to happen for something really good to happen, and that turned out to be the case for humankind, that we first had to go through the Khan debacle in order to get to the Federation, and I found that very profound. And having Lian Noonien Singh being the one who had to make that choice to not kill Khan was extraordinarily powerful, very reminiscent to me of City on the Edge of Forever, but in reverse, where she has to allow someone horrible to live. But she also goes through a similar thing with Kirk that the original Kirk, William Shatner, went through with Edith Keeler. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is anywhere remotely nearly as good as City on the Edge of Forever, but it certainly evoked those feelings for me. It's probably the closest thing that's ever going to come to that episode as far as time travel episodes go. And an incredible character episode for Lian, and Christina Chong was phenomenal. I think this, other than Quality of Mercy, is the strongest character episode in the entire series. So I have decided to go ahead and raise my rating. Originally a 9. I definitely have to move this up to a 10. I thought that I might after I first watched it, but watching it again, like, I am reassured that this is a phenomenal episode. One of the best time travel episodes Star Trek has ever done, and it is a 10 out of 10 for me. Okay, moving on to Season 2, Episode 4, Among the Lotus Eaters. So I feel like I had a lot to say about the previous 2 episodes. I don't have a ton to say about this one. I thought it was solid. I am typically not a huge fan of the Amnesia episodes, but this was a unique one because multiple characters went through it, and I found the concept of the man who was purposely forgetting and did not want to remember, and then we find out later that, he had a tragedy in his life that it seemed like he just wanted to forget, but then he was glad when he did remember. All of that was interesting. I thought they could have done a little better job with Ortegas. Like, this was billed as her episode, and it really wasn't, but I did enjoy her scenes in here. We still need a proper, full Ortegas-centric episode next season, but hopefully we'll get it. So my rating has not changed. I gave this a solid 8 out of 10, and it continues to be an 8 out of 10 for me. Okay, moving on to Season 2, Episode 5, Charades. And you know what? I made the mistake of looking at IMDb and seeing how shockingly high the user rating is for this episode. And I've heard some praise heaped on this episode before, and kind of odd for an episode that is objectively not very good, but okay. Alright, fine, it's not objectively not very good, but it's my opinion, but I mean, I just don't get it. Like, have you all not seen all the other 10 gazillion films and TV episodes using the same overused, trite, cliche, mean mother-in-law or mean father-in-law trope? It's the whole meet the parents thing. I've seen this so many times, and it's not any funnier now than it was the first time I saw it. And Star Trek itself has even done it in another episode I hate, You Are Cordially Invited, from Deep Space Nine. Why? Like, why is this good? And T'Pring is completely out of character here, breaking up with Spock. This just not mesh at all with the previous season's Spock Amok and the great chemistry that those two characters had. In fact, I named them as in my top 5 best romances in Star Trek, but this was completely a 180, and it was clearly contrived in order to set up this Spock and Chapel relationship that the writers clearly wanted to do this season, so they just suddenly have T'Pring change character, and it doesn't work for me. So I originally gave this episode a 6. I have lowered it now to a 5. Very tempted to lower it to a 4, but I had already said in my intro of this video that I did one episode of 6 and one of 5, so I gotta stick with that. So it's a 5, but I do think that's higher than this episode actually deserves. Okay, now we move on to Season 2, Episode 6, Lost in Translation. So, looking at IMDb ratings, I had the opposite reaction that I had to the previous episode. Very surprised this is as low as it is. I love this episode. What's wrong with this episode? This is a great horror episode. Much better than last season's horror episode. And the plot has been done before. It's taken elements of different episodes that have been done before, but so are a lot of Strange New Worlds episodes, so I don't see the problem. I love the relationship between Kirk and Uhura. Even if it is a retcon, I kind of like the retcon. It's a good retcon. It's the kind of retcon that I want to see. So I love this episode, and I'm actually going to raise it up from an 8.5 to a 9 to spite you haters out there. I think this was an excellent episode, one of the better ones of the season. It is a 9 out of 10 for me. So next we have Season 2, Episode 7, Those Old Scientists. And honestly, what is left to say about this episode that I have not already said? I did a whole big long review on it, and then I came back at the beginning of my next review and did like another 4 minutes talking about how great this episode is. I mean, not only is it hilarious, but it's sweet. It is so sweet. Oh, I love this episode so much. I would dare say it is one of the absolute best crossovers in Star Trek history. And in fact, the only other crossover that I think even comes close to it or is on par with it happened last year and also involved Lower Decks characters. So the episode Here All Trust Nothing in Lower Decks, where our Lower Deckers went to Deep Space Nine, I actually probably would rank that one slightly higher. It's a close call. It's a tough one. But I do think the two greatest crossovers in Star Trek history have happened in the last 2 years, and this is one of them. Absolutely phenomenal. I had originally given this a 9, but it only took me a few days when I released the video for the next episode that I had already raised it to a 10, and I am sticking to that 10 that I raised it to, an absolute 10, the absolute best episode of the season, and I would put it second place behind Quality of Mercy for the series. Alright, now we move to Season 2, Episode 8, Under the Cloak of War, the dark Deep Space Nine-esque episode. And while some might say, well, maybe some people don't like it because it's dark, I would say, no, I don't have a problem with it because it's dark. I love dark episodes, huge fan of Deep Space Nine. I have a problem with it because it's not a very good dark episode. It pales in comparison to anything Deep Space Nine ever did. In fact, the episode that it reminds me most of, as I mentioned in my intro, is Duet from the first season of Deep Space Nine. And it's a shame for this episode that it evokes images of Duet for me, because this is not even half as good as Duet. The ending of Duet is powerful. Well, the ending of this is kind of a head scratcher. It's like, M'Benga did what? And he's going to get away with it? What? We need to see some kind of consequences for his actions in the next season, even if it isn't to him directly, even if it's like the Klingons against the Federation. And there's got to be some kind of consequences. I mean, I don't know. It was a weird ending. I didn't think it was a particularly great episode. It was okay. I had originally given it a 7. I have then came back the next week and lowered it to a 6. So I am sticking with that 6 that I lowered it to. It was fine, but not anywhere near as good as anything on Deep Space Nine. Alright, and now we move to the controversial Divisive episode 9 of Season 2, Subspace Rhapsody. Although, again, looking at IMDb, it looks like the haters are winning out on IMDb. Like, if you love this episode, you should go rate it on IMDb if you care about such things. But, as I said in my intro, I am neither a hater nor a lover of this episode. I decided that I was just going to roll with this premise. Okay, you want to do a musical? Let's go. Let's do it. And
there were mixed results. I did like the intro song, like "Why Are We Singing," and I loved the Nurse Chapel number, and then of course the big number at the end was fabulous. But like, I needed more stuff like that. I needed more like the Nurse Chapel number, and I didn't think the tunes were particularly catchy. I didn't remember most of them. All I remember was there was a lot of people moping around and singing, "I am very sad, and I am going to sing about how sad I am for 10 consecutive minutes, and this song is going to go on and on." So I don't have a problem with it being a musical. I have a problem with some of the music that they had. So I disagree with people who say this was a really good musical. I think it could have been much better, but I also don't think it was terrible either. I did get some enjoyment, and I don't care what anyone says. The dancing Klingons was amazing. I will fight you for that to the death. Love the dancing Klingons. Anyways, I'm sticking with my original rating, which was a 7 out of 10. Hasn't changed. Don't love it. Don't hate it. 7 out of 10. Alright, let's wrap up the episode review portion of this video by talking about Season 2, Episode 10, Hegemony. Gee, I feel like I just reviewed this episode, because I kind of did, so I don't really have much new to add to what I just said last week. I thought this was a much better episode than I was expecting it to be, because it wasn't huge into the Gorn last year. I thought it was a very effective first part of a cliffhanger. The worst part about this episode is that we have to wait God knows how long to find out what happened, because the stupid executives won't pay the writers and the actors the respect and the money they deserve. So hopefully eventually those strikes will end and we'll finally get to see what happens in the second part of this episode. But yeah, it was pretty great, pretty solid. I gave it an 8 out of 10, and obviously less than a week later, I'm not changing that. It continues to be an 8 out of 10. And now let me go ahead and wrap this up by talking about my rating for the season as a whole.
Okay, and now that you've seen my updated ratings for each of the 10 singular episodes, now let me give you my rating out of 10 for the season as a whole. And as I said back in my intro, this was kind of a tough one for me to nail down, because there are some that I really love, some that I really didn't like as much, more so than season 1. And so to try to like average that all together, put it all together, see what I would give as a rating to the season as a whole. It was a tough one, but I do think that despite there being a couple episodes I wasn't huge on, and a couple that maybe were more in the middle, I think I come out overall feeling that this was an extremely strong season, and therefore my rating out of 10 for season 2 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, I've decided I'm just going to go ahead and give it a 9, because there were so many great moments in this season. Of course, I've talked about the Lower Decks episode, the great time travel episode, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. The musical, while not completely a hit for me, there were some things that I enjoyed about it. I think we had a really riveting end to the season, which has me waiting for season 3. And then overall, a lot of pretty strong episodes. Like 8. There was a bunch of 8s in there. So I think it all comes down to me to a 9. And if you're wondering what I gave season 1, I gave it a 9 as well. So I am oddly putting it on par with season 1, even though it's very different than season 1 in a lot of ways, as I've talked about earlier. But just as far as the overall quality and just how much I end up walking away enjoying the season, I do put it on par. And so I do give both of them a 9. And as I said, in my intro, your mileage is going to vary. If you think there were more bad episodes than I thought, you'd probably give it a lower rating. But for me, I'm giving this a 9. So there you have it. That is my review for Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2. I got nothing else for you right now, but coming up pretty soon, I'm going to cover at least the first 2 episodes of Star Wars Ahsoka. I'm definitely going to cover Star Trek, Lower Decks weekly. That's the only one I definitely am committing to doing weekly. We'll see about Ahsoka. I would love to cover the Wheel of Time, but I don't know if I'm going to have time to cover the Wheel of Time. So we'll see. So the point is, please subscribe and check out everything I've got, including my Star Trek Top 100. And I will see you all really soon. Goodbye.